Hey all, welcome back. Another edition Big Guy Fantasy Sports Fantasy Football Consistency Show. We are 1 week away from Thanksgiving. Yep, time's flying, folks. And as always, we're here for you as we are every Thursday night. Probably by the time you see it, it probably will be Friday. Hopefully, you're not having to watch the Browns Steelers game tonight because it probably will be ugly. Even regardless of who wins or who loses, it's going to be ugly because it's snowing, it's raining, it's 38 degrees. Welcome to Ohio. But it is not the sunny and palm tree-ish behind me, but it is behind that guy, and his name is Ron Rigney because he lives in Florida, and it's much nicer down there. Am I right, Ron? Welcome to the show.
Sunny, yes, but it's a balmy 59 degrees here, so we're getting out the parkas, we're getting out the gloves. There's going to be
Holy
iguanas
yeah.
freezing and falling from trees. It's going to get crazy here. So you got to get out that warm stuff. You got to wear your socks with your flip flops. But flying to Indiana tomorrow, so I'm going to get a dose of what you have up there. The only interest I really have in the game tonight is I need a little bit out of Nick Chubb. I'm hoping with that kind of climate, they're going to lean on him a little bit more than they have in the past couple of weeks. I could use a touchdown. So other than that. Yeah, it could end up being 3-0. You never know.
It could. We'll see. Yeah, I'm hoping for a little Nick Chubb and a little David Njoku.
Yes.
I think I might have Najee Harris in a league, maybe a dynasty league. I got him in. Can't remember. Maybe a couple leagues. But yeah, not expecting much. I did start Chris Boswell in try to pick him up and start him in every league that I had a kicker in, or I had to start a kicker. So I'm assuming that'll happen tonight quite a bit. We'll see. But anyway, we're here to talk about the consistency of everybody else other than Browns and Steelers. Now we're going to talk about Browns and Steelers too, probably. But we're going to focus on by position, everybody that is looking at this week. And as Ron said in his article, welcome to Bye-Mageddon. There's 6 teams on bye week this week. Everybody's back next week because it's Thanksgiving week. And then week 14, right before you start the playoffs, another 6 teams are off because the NFL doesn't care about us fantasy people. Now they do, but so a lot of buys this week. Make sure you check out Ron's article to help you with who's off. But I can tell you here, just in case, I'm sure you probably know this, but so we have Atlanta, Buffalo, Cincinnati, Jacksonville, New Orleans, the Jets, all are off this week. I feel like I'm missing one. Oh, Indy. No, Jacksonville.
Indy's week 14.
Yeah. They're week 14. So Cincy, Atlanta, Buffalo, quite a few big player names off this week. Kansas City will be coming up off in a couple of weeks, but we're going to help you get through the bye week. The Bye-Mageddon for week 12. And Ron, we look at the quarterback position, and it finally happened. Lamar Jackson didn't earn a clutch game. I think he was actually fairly close, but he didn't get it this week. Why? Because he played the Pittsburgh Steelers. That's why. They shut him down, as we kind of all expected, that they would kind of keep him in check. And Steelers actually went out and won that game. So Pittsburgh, gotta love them. I mean, I know I'm a Browns fan. I should hate the Steelers, but you got to respect this team. Every year goes out with Mike Tomlin at the helm. It doesn't matter who's playing quarterback. Doesn't matter who play. They have good defense. They run the ball well. They do everything. They execute, and they win football games. Sometimes it's ugly. Sometimes it's not. They win football games, and they shut down Lamar Jackson, knock him down to only 91%. He's still way ahead of second place, which is Jalen Hurts and Baker Mayfield at 80%. Josh Allen up to 73 now. Sam Darnold at 70%. Joe Burrow and Jaden Daniels at 64. Jordan Love at 63. Brock Purdy and Geno Smith at 60. Everybody else is below that. That is not good, folks. And we've had this conversation. We've talked about this ad nauseum. I'm sure you get tired of us talking about it, but not, again, a second year in a row that we've had poor consistency from quarterbacks. And now the clutch factor is about 19.3. So it's up a little bit from where it started. If you remember, it was like 17.5, 18, low 18s early to start the season. It's picked up a little bit, but the consistency is just not there for many of the big players, we've talked again about people like C.J. Stroud, Patrick Mahomes, Matthew Stafford, Aaron Rodgers, Prescott, all these guys who were top picks. Jared Goff is only at 40%. But he's ninth in total points because he had just had a couple of huge games. Ron, at this point, do you start thinking through the quarterback start sits? Like normally when you draft your number one quarterback, you're kind of like, that's my boy. I'm going with whether it's Burrow, whether it's Mahomes, whether it's Josh Allen. But some of these players, like if you had Patrick Mahomes, which I don't have a lot of, I think I have him once or twice because I didn't want to pay up that high. I was kind of holding back. I think you did the same thing. The Jordan Loves, the Joe Burrows, those kind of folks, and that Dak, Kirk Cousins-ish, kind of just waiting on some of these quarterbacks. But if you had Patrick Mahomes and you were in a must-win game of the next few weeks, and you had Sam Darnold, you had Bo Nix, you had Brock Purdy as a backup, are you thinking a lot more than you should, or at least we used to in the past, of who to start and who not?
I think you have to. The thing that I always have a little bit of reservation with is I feel like if I do that too much and I get too cute, it always backfires and it blows up in my face. But again, Patrick Mahomes is an interesting case. I mean, again, they're winning games. They're the odds-on favorite from the AFC. They just keep rolling. They finally came up on the short end this time. Another close game. That they weren't able to pull out this time. But I think with him, you have to start looking at that because you have to look at teams that, the Chiefs are going to be right there. They can run the ball with Kareem Hunt. Pacheco's coming back. They're one of the better defenses in the league. So they're doing it a little bit differently than they've had to do it in the past. And I think that that's obviously on purpose because, again, you've got a guy like Patrick Mahomes that if you need to rely on him, he can go down and win it most of the time. Wasn't able to pull it out this week. But I think they're just kind of looking at it a little bit differently based on what they do well, and what they're not doing well is throwing the ball. DeAndre Hopkins came over. Not really been a whole lot of change there. Noah Gray was the guy that was, hurting everybody at tight end. It wasn't Travis Kelce. So, right. So, I mean, it's one of those things where you don't really know where the fantasy production is coming from. But if you got a guy like Bo Nix, you got a guy like Derek Carr. I mean, I hate to say it, but you might look at that. You were talking about, well, we did a quarterback. My three quarterbacks in Kings Classic I've been relying on are Jared Goff, Baker Mayfield, and Jordan Love. And this week I'm kind of struggling with whether or not to go with Jordan Love or Baker Mayfield. So, again, I think you got to look at it because you're probably in a position where you got to hit those home runs and you got to, make that playoff run if you don't have it locked down.
Yeah. And then you're also this time of year, mid-November to the end of the end of the regular season for us. And then into the fantasy playoffs is also the weather, again, yeah. If Kansas City is playing in Denver and it's snowing, does it make more sense to go with a Matthew Stafford who might be in beautiful Los Angeles playing, in the SoFi Stadium? So, yeah, there's just so many things. I mean, I think if anything, this kind of emphasizes the idea of when you draft quarterbacks, and I don't care if it's a one quarterback league at all, I think you have to really think through having a solid backup, if not two, if you've got a deep enough league. Because the way these quarterbacks have been playing, there's not a lot of consistency to rely upon. And if you did reach to get a Hurts or an Allen or a Mahomes, now Allen and Hurts are fine. They're pulling their weight 80 and 73%. But if you pick Mahomes and you were like, I got Mahomes, I don't need a backup. And then all of a sudden everybody else got two quarterbacks. You might be struggling to be starting Russell Wilson or Derek Carr. And, again, they've had their moments, but they're just as bad consistency-wise as the rest of them. So, I think it really kind of solidifies, and I did this, I know you did it quite a bit, is like when I got to rounds 7, 8, 9, I picked two quarterbacks out of probably those 3 rounds and got a Burrow with a Purdy or a Jordan Love with see what did I pick? I didn't get Sam Darnold, but I don't know if I picked Baker. Probably probably is Kirk Cousins, which hasn't been that great. I haven't started him that much, but the weeks that I did, I actually got lucky in that one big week he did. So, but Ron, the rest of the quarterbacks, we know they're kind of a mess, but let's talk about maybe somebody that might be still floating out there in the waiver wire that for these Mageddons weeks of 12 and 14 that you might actually, people are going to go, who? Wait a minute, him? But why don't you tell us about who you got?
Yeah, so and just kind of add to that too, I think you reach a point in your draft where, you've got a bunch of running backs and receivers, tight ends, kind of questionable guys that you're going to fill your bench with that you may or may not keep. If you've got a bench spot and you're in that, you've gotten to that point, and there's some decent quarterbacks on the board, and you've already taken a guy like Josh Allen, like Patrick Mahomes or Jalen Hurts or whoever, go ahead and snag that quarterback and stash him away a little bit. If you end up having two top tier quarterbacks, you got yourself a trade chip. If one of your guys sucks, you can do that. The con streaming that we talk about, find that clutch and that consistency with the better matchup. So the guys that I'm talking about this week, yeah, and every guy's one hit away from that. But I feel like those the quarterbacks, the blind side, they're done. They're done. So the guys I'm talking about, a little bit scary, but again, you need to hit those home runs. We're talking about Dallas's QBs. We're talking about Cooper Rush. We're talking about Trey Lance. Cooper Rush threw for 354 yards, only threw one touchdown because I looked at the numbers for Cooper Rush and I looked at the scores, a little deceiving. They weren't able to punch it in when they got in the red zone. 354 yards, but only 10 points for that offense. But a couple of things that were kind of encouraging there. Averaged a few more yards per completion than he has. I think his yards per completion before the game against Houston was about 2. I think he went up to like 7 or 8, so it did increase a little bit. And there's been a little bit of talk, too, about Trey Lance having a package of plays because he can do it a little bit with his legs. And I don't know if you forgot about Trey Lance, but as far as an NFL quarterback, I still don't think we really know. But we know the kid is an athlete, and we know he can run. And so Mike McCarthy's rumored to have a package of plays in there for him. And who knows, if that season keeps going south, they might just want to see what they have in Trey Lance. But coming up the next couple of weeks, in those 2 bye weeks, coming up this week, they got a Commanders team that has not been good against the pass, and they've got a Bengals team in Week 14 that has not been either. So I think with them both being owned in about 2% of ESPN leagues, if that's where you play, I would assume most leagues it's the same way. I don't think people are breaking the door down to get Cooper Rush or Trey Lance, but it might not be a bad little stash, especially if you have, again, if you have a guy in Week 14, if you're starting Bo Nix or you're starting Stroud or a guy like I can't think of the guy for Jaden Daniels. There we go. I had to think about that. My brain's freezing up since it's under 60 down here. So if you got one of those guys in Week 14, don't be afraid to look at putting one of them in because they do have some solid matchups, and it's going to be something that those guys are probably going to be left out there.
Yeah, and I was looking at the weather to see if Washington, says there's a slight chance of rain showers, but a very slight. But a lot of the weather that's coming through us is going to be heading towards Washington, and that's where they're playing this week. The only really bad one looks like it's Seattle, but Seattle has a dome. I don't know why they don't show a dome there that they can open and close. Green Bay, 40% rain. Nothing out of the ordinary. Tonight's the worst one with 13-mile-an-hour winds and 37 degrees and snow. So coming off that lakefront up there, it's going to be ugly. But personally, I wanted to talk about, again, maybe out there, it depends on your league, depends on how shallow it is. But Justin Herbert, who started off 0 for 6 and really didn't look like he was going to do much of anything. The Jim Harbaugh Express was in place. They're running the ball. J.K. Dobbins is doing well. Gus Edwards, the Gus Bus is back, doing a little bit, not a lot yet. But J.K.'s been pretty much carrying the load, but haven't had a need to throw the ball too much. Quentin Johnson was hurt. Really haven't, again, got anything going. But the last 4 weeks, Justin Herbert, 4 straight clutch games. He is now officially ahead of Patrick Mahomes at 30%, who's got 30%. Just to show you. And so Justin Herbert could be sitting out there, might be worth picking up this week. They are, where are they playing? Just had that. So they play Monday night at home against the Ravens. Ravens 31st, 32nd against the pass. So again, might be one of those Mageddon, grab him. before it's too late. Get him in your lineup. Great matchup this week. That could be a nice little shootout. Again, don't have to worry about weather because it's in the nice little confines of SoFi Stadium. So definitely check that out. And like I said, over the last few weeks, again, 297, 2 touchdowns last week against Cincy. Ran for a touchdown in week 10 against Tennessee. 282 and 2 against Cleveland in week 9. 279 and 2 against New Orleans. 349, no touchdowns, but again, it's putting up the yardage. Quentin Johnston's been doing well. Now we got Will Disley out there catching some balls, and we all know we're all favorites of Will. So definitely some weapons out there he's starting to utilize. Of course, Dobbins out of the backfield, and so the offense is clicking, and they're throwing the ball a little bit more. So that's a good thing for Justin Herbert. And so if you can grab him, get him in your lineup as well.
And real quick too, don't forget, you mentioned the rushing touchdown, but the rushing yardage totals last 3 out of the last 4 weeks, he's had 49, 32, and 65 yards. And if you watch that game, I think they played the primetime game last week. I think it was Sunday night. He ripped off a nice little about 25-yard run for a first down. So looks like he's finally starting to get back from the injury, getting that confidence back. Because you remember, he came in the league. One of the things he was highly underrated for, that he got you a lot of points for that rookie season, was those rushing totals. So it looks like he's starting to get comfortable pulling it and doing that again as well.
Yeah, good call. I totally missed that as I was looking at the numbers. All right, so let's move to the running back positions, and we still have a multiple of people here at the top. Derrick Henry, Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, all 100% consistent. First, fourth, and sixth, respectively, in total points. 91%, Kamara, 90%. We got 3 of them: Kyron Williams, David Montgomery, Josh Jacobs. 88%, Joe Mixon, Kenneth Walker, and Brian Robinson. 86%, Kareem Hunt. Barkley, quite a few at 80%. I'll just read them real quick. Barkley, James Cook, Chuba Hubbard, James Conner, Aaron Jones, and Austin Eckler. It's just dumbfounding to me this year how the running backs have just had a resurgence. Usually there's maybe 20, 15 that are above, 70%, and there's at least that. There might even be a top 24 there at 60% or higher. And we got 4 at 60% as well. You have to go all the way down to 50%. You're at like Zach Charbonnet, Javonte Williams, Travis Etienne. Some of these guys have been injured. But most of the major running backs are in that 60% or higher, some more, some less. But I think what it shows is if you didn't go crazy with the wide receivers and you at least maybe grabbed one good one or a couple of them within your first 5 rounds, you probably are doing pretty well, because it's round 4 or 5 where those Kyron Williams, David Montgomery's, Josh Jacobs, Joe Mixon's, those kind of folks, James Conner, Aaron Jones, you didn't have to reach high to get some of these solid, and they're all being very consistent. Now, they all big range of total points numbers, but the consistency is there. They're getting your points for you. And Ron, we haven't seen a resurgence like this of running backs. Gosh, I can't remember the last time, when probably 5 years ago, maybe 5, I'm thinking 5-ish years, that we actually were like, it'll be interesting to see how the drafts fall out next year with the number of running backs and wide receivers in round 1. Because if you remember a few years ago, or 5 years ago, it was like 9 running backs and 3 receivers. And then last year was like a complete flip. It was 3 running backs and 9 receivers. So we've had that flip flop, but this year, I'm not going to lie, the leagues I'm doing well in, I drafted more running backs in rounds 4, 5, 6 than I had in the past. And it's paying off. That's for sure. So tell us your thoughts on the running back position. Some of the guys are there, and then kind of walk us through a guy that you think might be available out there to pick up for the Buymageddon.
So guys that I took, I kind of picked my first running back in that same spot. I waited a little bit on the second one. I got a couple there, and I got my starters there, and so far they've been healthy. So far they worked out. I got a lot of James Cook. I got a couple of DeAndre Swift shares. I added Kareem Hunt after he became available. And signed with the Chiefs. So my running backs are kind of all over the place, but we'll see how it shakes out. It's always a flip flop trend every year. It goes back and forth. We were talking a few years ago about taking Travis Kelce in the first round and taking tight ends, and so it just kind of fluctuates. But again, those guys that you spent those higher picks on, just kind of like we've talked about before, they're paying off for you. The guy that I'm highlighting, not necessarily going to be available in leagues, but it could be a guy that, maybe in your off season, your dynasty league, might want to try to kick the tires on this guy and see how it shakes out. Because again, a lot of these these rookie running backs, I drafted a lot of them on a few teams just to see who kind of shook out. The one guy that I didn't get enough of was him, and that's Tyrone Tracy for the New York Giants. And again, when you got a guy that coming in, guys that has a little speed, can do a little bit of everything, and your starter's Devin Singletary, you got to like the odds that guy's going to overtake him for the starting spot, and that's what's happened. 5 out of the last 6 weeks, he's gotten at least 16 carries. He's got a 20-carry, 145-yard effort against the Steelers a few weeks ago. Pretty solid team to get 145 yards and a touch against. I'd love it if Nick Chubb was able to do that for me tonight. Last week, 18 for 103 against Carolina, but the guy's legit. Dude's got speed. He's definitely a little more explosive than Devin Singletary. But again, they're gonna be starting Tommy Cutlets this week, so they're gonna have to hand the ball off early and often. Hey, forget about it. And so they're gonna give him the ball. They're gonna have to. They're gonna have to be. He doesn't catch the ball a lot. That's the only knock against him. And I don't. Again, I don't know much about his college career off the top of my head, but I'm hoping that be a little bit more check down type stuff, and they can get him the football out of the backfield a little bit. But Tyrone Tracy's a legit running back for a 5th round guy, man. And you probably didn't have to spend a whole lot in your draft if you ended up getting him. And if you did, he's been a fixture in your lineup probably the last 7 weeks. So again, not going to be available. It might be a guy that you could trade for in your offseason dynasty leagues, though.
Yeah, I love it. And for those of you who are concerned that the guy on the sidelines this week for the New York Giants at quarterback number 4 is a guy making $40 million because that's where they moved Daniel Jones down to. Did you know that?
Mm-hmm.
Down to QB4. So
not
now
great.
if Cutlets gets if Mr. Vinny Cutlets here, hey, if he gets hurt, they're going to Drew Lock, and I forget who the third guy is before. Oh, they picked up somebody, and they said he's a QB3 and not Jones. I'm like, I'm sure
as long as we get to see Tommy Cutlet's agent, who dresses like he's a mob boss and he's on the sideline on the phone, I'm happy. I'm good. That's all I need.
Yeah. I mean, it's like Taylor Swift sightings. We hope we got to see Tommy Cutlet's agent, as you mentioned. So the guy I'm going to talk about, I mean, again, he's on everybody's team because everybody picked him up. It's Kareem Hunt. And I just want to talk about the fact that Isaiah Pacheco is practicing, and there's a lot of people panicking. I've had people reach out to me and where I have him, and, they want to, trade me Pacheco, or they have Pacheco and they want, and, I never got any real offers that I felt like it made sense. But don't give up on Kareem Hunt. I don't think he's done just because Pacheco is back. First off, Pacheco is coming off, pretty decent injury. It's a pretty serious injury. And so I feel like it's going to take some time to him to get back in the swing. But so this week, he may or may not play. I would think if he does play at all, it won't be much. And then it'll be week 13 and they play against the Raiders. So again, are you going to risk Pacheco with too much out there? And then in week 14, no, they're not on a bye. Their bye is long gone. They play the Chargers. So I feel like if you have Kareem Hunt, first off, he's probably not your RB1. If he is, you were in trouble from the get-go. He might be your RB2 if somebody got hurt, but he's probably your RB3, which means he's a flex. As a flex, you're getting 10 points. So now you might think about who you're putting in your flex. You might interchange somebody where before he was an automatic start. I mean, he was getting 15 points a week, 20 points a week. Last week was actually his worst game. He only had 6. They didn't throw to him at all, which I didn't understand against Buffalo. The week before, he had 7 catches for 65 yards. He had 0 against Buffalo, and they lost. So what does that tell you? They should throw the ball more to Kareem Hunt. Just saying. But, he's done what he's supposed to do. He's been a great asset to this team. I think the Chiefs will be smart enough to use them both interchangeably and let Pacheco slowly come back. I wouldn't be surprised if they do that all the way through the playoffs because it makes sense. Hunt's been performing well. Pacheco is good when he's out there. We understand that. But, how long is it going to take for him to ramp back up? So don't panic if you're a Kareem Hunt owner. Keep him in there. You're going to be okay. All right, let's move over to the wide receiver position. So I'll just say it now. Chris Godwin will be 100% consistent for the rest of the year because he's hurt, if you didn't know that. He went down. He was 100% consistent, 7 for 7. So he will finish the season 100% consistent. But let's forget about him for a minute. Let's go to the people who are playing. Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson. No surprise. Number 1, number 2. 91%, 90%. Malik Neighbors, 88%. A.J. Brown, 86. Cooper Kupp, 83. Nico Collins, 83. Even though he came back and didn't earn a clutch game, which was disappointing. T. Higgins, 83%. Amon-Ra St. Brown, 80. CeeDee Lamb, 80. Khalil Shakir, 80. Josh Downs, 78, 75%. Stephon Diggs not playing. Rashid Rice not playing. Drake London, and then Terry McLaurin at 73%. Alan Lazard not playing, 71%. Cortland Sutton and George Pickens at 70. A lot of good names up there. A lot of people you expect to see. A lot of people that you probably don't see because you look further down, and we've got guys like Garrett Wilson. We got guys like DK Metcalf, and we got Tyreek Hill and Puka Nacua. Who's been hurt? Okay, I get that. Deebo Samuel, Marvin Harrison Jr., Devontae Adams. A lot of people below that 70% mark, some down in the 50s. Ron, your thoughts on the wide receiver position as we head into week 12? Many of these guys are on bye, but I think there's also a lot of good players out there that may be worth picking up, maybe the time, especially in this desperate times that we are in week 12, in week 14 coming up. What's your thoughts on the wide receiver position and who you like out there that might be worthwhile picking up?
It's you got the usual suspects at the top. Not a lot of surprises there, but it's kind of interesting. One thing I was noticing while you were going over that was a lot of those guys that are around like the top 15, top 10 in scoring are only about 60% consistent. So again, you're getting points, but you're not getting them spread out like we like to see with that consistency. A couple injuries too. So some guys towards the top. Of course, you mentioned Cooper Kupp, Nico Collins, T. Higgins. Those guys have gotten back on track since they've been back. But the guy that I'm going to focus on here is Roma Dunze for Chicago. And, Caleb Williams has been under fire. They fired their offensive coordinator. There's rumblings of, Matt Eberflus is the next one to go, which it wouldn't surprise me. I'm kind of shocked he was back this season. You have veterans talking about, and I don't know how much truth there is to this about maybe benching Caleb Williams, but Roma Dunze has had the targets there. Now, again, he's a rookie. I'd like to see more catches, but when you look at his numbers over the course of the year, he's gone over 100 yards a couple of times. He's got 40 yards in about every game but 3. He's received at least 6 targets in about every game but 3 or 4. Had 10 last week against Green Bay, holding 6 catches for 65 yards. So again, he's not going to be your wide receiver 1, probably not going to be your wide receiver 2, but you got some bye weeks coming up. And again, we always talk about those flex spots, those 3 flex spots we have in Kings Classic. Roma Dunze has been a fixture in my flex spot. And again, he's getting me right around that 9.5, 10-point mark. Like to see a couple more touchdowns as well. Got Minnesota coming up this week. Minnesota is not good against the pass. They're not good against fantasy receivers. So if he's out there, I don't know what the ownership percentage looks like in more shallow leagues. I would guess with the way that the Chicago offense, especially the pass offense, has been playing, he's probably going to be out there in some of your more shallow leagues. But if he is, or if you got him, this would be the week to fire him up against Minnesota.
Yeah, yeah, no, like you said, this is a week to do it. The weather is, it's going to be Chicago weather, windy, cold, but that's what they love, right? That's why they play football there. That's why they didn't put a dome on Soldier Field. They want to play real football there, so should be a good one. And yeah, Roma Dunze has certainly been, two out of his last three clutch games, so certainly starting to become a little bit more of a force with Caleb Williams. Another guy that's been pretty hot lately, and kind of goes with my Justin Herbert choice from a little bit ago, is Lad McConkey. A lot of people may not realize he's right there, 19th in total points, only 50% consistent, but he's 3 out of his last 4. So he started off slow. Again, the whole Chargers pass offense started off slow, but he's starting to click now. Last week was a big game for Lad. I had the Lad 6 for 123, 2 for 52 the week before that, 5 for 64, 6 for 111, and 2 touchdowns against New Orleans in week 8. So there is no question that he has become, the favorite target for Mr. Justin Herbert. Yes, Quentin Johnson is there, but Quentin Johnson is more of the deep pass, seems been catching some touchdowns, Quentin Johnson, but hasn't been really getting a lot of targets, picks, or catches there. The last 2 weeks, he's only had 2 catches. Now, scored a touchdown both, so hence why Quentin Johnson's done well. But Lad McConkey has been the man there for the Chargers. As I mentioned earlier, this week they're playing Monday night at home on TV. So could be another good week for our lad there. He's a fine lad, he is. So let's move on to the tight end position. Always our favorite. Still less consistent than the quarterbacks. As bad as the quarterbacks could get, I don't think they're ever going to reach the tight ends, because guess what? There are only 4, count them, 4 tight ends that are over 60% or higher in consistency. That is not good. And the amazing thing is that 2 out of the 4, well, I shouldn't say they weren't drafted, but probably not. I mean, I think there's people who loved Brock Bowers and thought he was going to do well. He's even blowing my expectations away. I mean, it's all they got right now in Las Vegas to throw to. Even my fan favorite of Jacoby Myers isn't getting the ball. So I think basically Uncle Rico is just throwing 5-yard turnaround, button hook passes to Brock Bowers all game long, and that's all they're doing. But he's up there. Him and George Kittle cranking away up there. Kittle at 78%. Bowers is now first in total points, 80% consistent. Trey McBride, 78%, and at 60% is Kate Otten. That's it. There's a couple of 57s, 50s, but after that, it just becomes an ugly, ugly, ugly scene. And it doesn't matter who unless you drafted one of those guys, maybe you're lucky. Maybe you picked up Kate Otten before everybody kind of found out. Maybe you drafted Brock Bowers, but it's an ugly scene. The only thing you can do is you can hope you catch fire. And I've caught fire the last couple of weeks, and I'll talk about that guy here after Ron gets through his guy. But that's about all you can do. I mean, hopefully you kept Mark Andrews if you drafted him and didn't trade him or dump him after 4 weeks. And now, you got red hot, but now he's won for his last 3. So it really is just catching the, the right fire at the right time when these guys go off, because it's been all over the place from Jatavian Sanders to Gesicki to Josh Oliver, like I said, Jonnu Smith now's the one, and I'll talk about him in a little bit. Hunter Henry was hot there for a while. So Ron, the tight end position, we know it, we love it. What are we doing? Who are you pinpointing that might be out there to save you 1 week at a time? That's about all they're doing.
I think what you meant to say there is we don't know anything about it and we can't stand it is what I think you meant to say there. And luckily the leagues that I'm still in, I got George Kittle. And that kind of bit me in the ass last week because I missed the morning report that he wasn't going to play. So my dynasty league, my money league, took a 0 for that one, but I did still pull out the victory. But honestly, when I look at my waivers, probably the guy I added wouldn't have got me much more anyway. So luckily, the rest of my team went off a little bit. But the guy I'm going to talk about again, we were talking about him off air. If you watched the game the other night, the Texans and the Cowboys, you saw that Jake Ferguson went out with a concussion, did not practice Wednesday, did not practice today. So not looking too promising for Mr. Ferguson to be in there. So we're going to look at Mr. Luke Schoonmaker, who has 2 clutch games on the season. Saw 10 targets last week after Jake Ferguson leaves the game. They've got Washington coming up, who's kind of middle of the road against the tight end. So not a great matchup, but with Cooper Rush or Trey Lance in there, you're going to see some checkdowns. I think you could do a lot worse, especially when we get these bye weeks coming up. Because as far as tight ends, let's see who we've got on bye this week. So you've got Kyle Pitts, you've got Evan Ingram out. You might have Taysom Hill out, so you might need to fill in there. And depending on who you have anyway, they might not be performing. So I'm sure Luke Schoonmaker's out there. I'm sure he's not owned in a lot of leagues, and he might be a guy that might be a nice little flex option in some deeper leagues as well.
Yeah, I when Turd Ferguson went down a few weeks ago, I don't remember what week it was. I picked up Schoonmaker to fill in for that week and did pretty good. I think that's when he earned his last clutch game. I guess that was week 2. I didn't realize it was that far back. And like you said, this week, Turd Ferguson goes down, boom, he's back in and rolling along. So, yeah, definitely getting the love. And like you said, with the quarterback situation, they're going to do basically the same thing that Uncle Rico does with Brock Bowers. So I get it. Guy I'm going to look at, as I mentioned, catch lightning in a bottle, right? And that guy is Jonnu Smith. I picked him up in the Kings Classic, and I may have picked him up in both leagues the week that I forget who was on a bye for me. Might have been Njoku. And I was like, oh, well, I'll just grab him, put him in. And it was the week, I think, against Indy where he went 7 for 96 for a touchdown. I'm like, all right, cool, I'll keep him. Next week, he goes 4 for 20. I'm like, oh, okay. And so he's been back and forth, but this past week was just, I'm sure whoever I played against went, what? How the hell did I get beat by? Because you have those games, right? You look at the score and you're like, man, I swear that team I was going to play this week sucked. What happened? And then you see a Jonnu Smith go for 28.1 fantasy points, 6 for 101 and 2 touchdowns in the Dolphins game against the Raiders. So guess what? Kansas City, I think, is played. No, wait a minute. Who's the Raiders playing this week? Or are they off this week? Raiders are playing Denver. So I don't know. Adam Trotman. I don't know. Who's the tight end? Is Noah Fant? I forget. Anyway,
no Fant. Adam Trotman.
Yeah,
that's the guy you want.
So put Trotman in. Might be a good start this week because obviously the Raiders cannot stop the tight end position. So, is Jonnu Smith available out there? Probably not, but you never know. Somebody might have dropped him. They may have already picked him up off the waivers. So, especially after last week's performance, I could see people diving for him if he was available in your league. So, check him out if he's out there. And if not, maybe try to trade for him. He might be a backup to somebody. So, all right, Ron. So tell everybody, I'm assuming you have your card of the week. Yes, you do.
I do. And I went back again, just grabbed a random one out of there. And I'm kind of glad I grabbed this one, a guy that you don't think about a lot. Mr. Thurman Thomas, the Terminator from the 1993 playoff set there. And to quote our friend Chris Berman, those early Buffalo Bills teams always circle the wagons, and they circled the wagons around this guy. This guy was the scrimmage yards leader every year. On the back here, it talks about how in 1992 he ran for 1,487 yards and added 626 yards receiving. So the dude was a workhorse, Hall of Famer. Again, if you missed out seeing this guy play, go back and check out some highlights, man, because those Buffalo Bills teams that, they get a lot of flack for going and losing 4 straight Super Bowls. But, man, that offense was something to watch with Jim Kelly and Andre Reed and Thurman Thomas and James Lofton and all those guys. But this guy, there's not a lot that they're built like him. And just to kind of put this into perspective, how great he was in college as well, him and Barry Sanders shared the same backfield at Oklahoma State, which is almost just unfair. That's like Madden type stuff. So shout out to Thurman Thomas.
I remember.
Yeah,
that.
huge for those Buffalo Bills teams. So, again, get over to BigGuyFantasySports.com. I made the waiver wire article a little bit different this week. I went over your buys. I went over week 12 and week 14, a couple guys that have some matchups coming up, not just this week, but in the next few weeks. So, if you got those big bye weeks coming up, especially week 14, grab a couple of those guys that are in the article. And I also gave you your weekly reminder to get you a share of Audric Estime. He's still under 30% owned in leagues. I'm shouting this guy's name from the rooftops. If you're in a dynasty league, you better grab him or better try to trade for him. So check out Consistently Cash and check out the prop stuff. Check out all the articles, all the good stuff over BigGuyFantasySports.com.
You got it. Yeah, everything's out there. James Knight will be out tomorrow for sure. Kobe and Ron will be traveling to the Midwest. He hates 59 degrees so bad in Florida. He's going to go to where it's 40. That's the kind of tough guy he is. That's why he's got that big beard, because he's got to stay warm when he comes up north. So anyway, check all of that out. Of course, you can find me on Twitter at Bob_Lung. And no, I'm not going to Blue Sky or whatever it's called. Sorry, I'm not doing it. Just follow me on Twitter. It's fine. But anyway, check everything out there. So for Ron Rigney, I'm Bob Lung. Take care. God bless. We will probably talk to you next week before Thanksgiving. Maybe we will. I'm sure we'll be on the air, but have a great week. If we don't talk to you, if we don't see you, have a great Thanksgiving. We'll see you soon. Take care.